Hey guys, it's Bree. Happy Thursday. Let's go ahead and talk about Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. It's the longest book, not just in pages, but because it's also the whiniest of the books. Recapping real quick, when we left off in the last book, Harry had just finished the Triwizard Tournament. When he goes to grab the cup that is the trophy for the Triwizard Tournament, that's in the middle of a maze at the last challenge, he is transported to the cemetery that's attached to Tom Riddle Sr.'s estate. That's Voldemort's father's home. There, Voldemort and Wormtail use Harry's blood to bring Voldemort back to his full power, in the process killing Cedric Diggory. Harry returns with Cedric's body and barely with his own life, runs to tell Dumbledore about what happened, and Dumbledore proceeds to tell the school. 2 months later, we find Harry back with the Dursleys, stuck at Privet Drive, miserable. But when a bunch of Dementors show up and attack Harry and his cousin Dudley, Harry goes to stay for the rest of the summer with the Order. The Order of the Phoenix is a group of people dedicated to taking down Voldemort. They have, by and large, spent the last war doing so and are picking up where they left off. Then we start getting the temper tantrums. Harry gets really mad that no one told him about the super secret Order of the Phoenix when he was staying at an unsecure location. And then he gets mad that nobody wants to tell him what this super secret, like, basically spy organization is doing. Because he's 15 and that seems like a good idea. But he's staying with his godfather for the duration of the summer, which is pretty awesome, even if it's in a run-down home that's been enchanted to basically spout racist slurs at every third person who walks past. When they go back to Hogwarts, it actually kind of looks like it's going to be a pretty mundane year. Harry, Hermione, and Ron are about to take their ordinary wizarding level tests. That's like, I think the wizarding equivalent of like the SAT or the GCSEs. So it's the test that will determine probably your entire future, the rest of your course of study, what job you'll have after school, etc., etc. And that is the most stressful year, as you might imagine, or the second most stressful year, because they have to take another set of tests in their 7th. All of the kids are freaking out, no one's getting adequate sleep, and then worse comes to worst, and Dolores Umbridge shows up. Dolores is the worst. She's maybe actually the most malicious character. I'm gonna go ahead and say, like, she gives Voldemort a run for her money in a much more subtle, less murderous way, but perhaps she's equally as evil. Dolores Umbridge is the woman who's taking over the Defense Against the Dark Arts post, and she has a weirdo crush, I think, on Cornelius Fudge. She's doing anything and everything she can to keep him in power and to prove that Dumbledore is trying to overthrow the Ministry and that Harry Potter is a lying McLiar. She's really just actively malicious. She forces the kids to write with pens that cause their hands to bleed and scratch messages into the back of them. She uses illegal, highly regulated truth potions to try and get confessions out of kids for things they've done. She uses the Cruciatus Curse, or attempts to, and gets like a bunch of people fired after she has a kind of ministry-supported coup of Hogwarts. No one likes her. They're not gonna like her. She doesn't really deserve to be liked. So there is some fun stuff that goes on. There's Dumbledore's Army, which is a group that they use to subvert Umbridge's plot to not teach them any defense against the dark arts. There is Cho Chang, who is the love interest who Harry goes on his first date. And of course, all sorts of other fun stuff. There's a lot that I actually really liked about this. The hardest part for me is that I just think the teen angst is so insurmountable. And it's like Joe Rowling found out what the caps lock key did and thought it was like the best thing since sliced bread. There are all caps yelling conversations all the heck over this book. And it's a little, it's egregious. That being said, there are a couple of things I liked. I really like Hermione, of course. She's just consistently clever and keeps pointing out to the guys when they're being insensitive jerks. The flip side of the coin, she apologizes for things she hasn't done that they're mad about, and it's kind of like, oh, sweetheart, stop it. But you know, good on her for telling them they have the emotional ranges of teaspoons. I was surprised with some of the things that I didn't notice as a kid that I think were actually surprisingly well done. Most of these are actually character development things, because we'll talk in a minute about how this is filled with plot holes. But I really, as a kid, I didn't like Cho Chang. I really thought she was just the whiniest, and I didn't, like, I kind of didn't know why she wasn't pulling herself together. As an adult, and especially as an adult who has lost a significant other, I can appreciate a lot more what Rowling was going for. I think she gives Cho the short end of the stick still, because Cho still comes out of it seeming hysterical, and seemingly improperly so, right? There's still an element to which Cho's emotional state is kind of laughed at, but it's there, and she does attempt to give it a level of complexity. I really liked seeing Ginny and Neville, both of them grow a lot in this book. It's like the first book where we get to see Ginny actually talk like a normal person, and we find out that she's kind of a badass. In my own personal headcanon, of which I have a plethora, when Ginny performs the Bat Bogey Hex on Draco Malfoy, he a little bit falls in love with her after that. Neville is fantastic. Neville as a character, I think, just represents a lot of the insecurities that everybody has. You know, he's clumsy and he's forgetful and he just can't seem to get his shit together. And like, who doesn't feel like that, right? We all have moments, some of us more than others, where we just feel like, why does anybody waste their time on us, right? And as a character, that's almost the entire character description of Neville, right? But in this book, he really grows and becomes more confident and more determined, and I just really liked seeing him push through some of those things to become somebody who's very outwardly brave and surprisingly competent, who at the end of the book is like the only one who can manage to keep going throughout the battle alongside Harry. I come out of this one being like, oh, Neville, heartthrob. I did have a moment now as an adult where two of the characters in particular stand out as like, oh, you jerks. The first one is Sirius Black, which doesn't necessarily surprise me. As a kid, I had a huge crush on Sirius Black. But he's just, we knew he was kind of a snot-nosed jerk as a kid. And this book really shows a couple of things that put him, for me, in a really bad light. The first is that he's actively kind of trying to turn Harry into his father, right? Which is not healthy. And also he's like a 45-year-old man who's bringing up high school insults to Severus Snape because he knows it just cuts him to the quick, which is not cool. That's not okay. It didn't occur to me as a kid that he wasn't a normal adult. And as an adult, all I can think is, of course he screwed up. He went to prison for 15 years when he was basically my age, right? For a crime he didn't commit in a prison that basically imposes crippling depression on its inmates intentionally. He's not going to be normal. But I didn't really realize that as a kid, you know? The other thing is how really not okay Dolores is. She's breaking all sorts of rules and is the very picture of like the banality of evil. This one has been on my mind since the third book, but who the heck does the laundry at Hogwarts? I mean, there's like what? Let's estimate there's 100 kids in each class, right? That's like a good 700 kids worth of laundry, plus all of their like Quidditch stuff and their weekend clothes. Who's doing that? The house elves can't touch it. We never addressed that. As a kid, I thought the house elves must do it, but there's also, of course, the one about Harry not being able to see the Thestrals from the very start. You know, that is what it is. There is all sorts of stuff that, like, just the lack of continuity or the lack of political influence that Lucius Malfoy has to prevent himself from going to jail when he pretty much has Cornelius Fudge under his thumb. Like, I would expect that he would get a really light sentence or that he'd be able to wiggle his way out. Granted, doing Death Eater things is bad. He should be in Azkaban. I'm just a little surprised that there was not a big to-do made about it. There's a mention of no cures for werewolves, which is fine because we know that that's where she's been going the last couple books, but may I mention again, in book 2, there's talk of a cure for werewolves. Just things like that kind of get to me. And it feels like, it's just another one of those things, like, it feels like there are a lot of moments in this series where Joe Rowling is like, you know what would be really awesome? Let's have werewolves. Or, you know what would be really awesome? There are these winged magic horses that no one can see unless you've seen someone die. And then she kind of has to, like, hand wave at why it's not consistent with what she did beforehand. I mean, there's a lot of really good foreshadowing, but there's a lot of stuff, I think, as well that she throws in because she thinks it would be really cool last minute, and then it just doesn't really work. At least not for me. I don't know. The biggest problem I'm always going to have with this particular one is just the amount of angst. It's just endless. Endless angst. I was 11 when I first read this, and so I think it was just a little bit less egregious. I didn't quite tune into it. And as an adult, I'm like, oh, all the hormones and all the angry people. I really, like, it's a turnoff. If you were an adult reading this, or perhaps just somebody a little bit more in tune to angst than I was, it's a little bit of a slog. And some of the pacing in particular in the middle does not help. But overall, I mean, there are some interesting aspects to it. The character development of Neville, I think, is absolutely the highlight of this book. For me, that's what makes it. You know, a lot of the other characters are okay or new, but the character growth for Neville and some of the character growth for Ginny, I think, are really well done, and it's long overdue, to be honest. If you have read Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, you know the drill. Tell me what you think. I hope you're having a fantastic reading week. I'll talk to you later. Bye.